We're live, and we're already out of focus. I need to fix that. There we go. How are you guys doing? It is Friday night. Drum roll. Almost. Well, technically, I guess it is the weekend because we're already done with work or school. I'm not done with work, but lots of people are done with school, so that's good. We've got a lot of cool things going on all at once. We got stuff going on with Oliver's Nova, with my truck, with the 2.2 liter Dodge. I'm shooting a video tomorrow with the L28 Nissan Turbo 300 or 280ZX motor. I just put up one on small block Chevy stuff, a whole bunch of different five, as a matter of fact, different 500 horsepower combinations, which is good. And it's interesting how we got the power outputs of each one of those. But more importantly, which one of those would you choose? And then you could, as always, we can extrapolate from that one and go, okay, well, even if I'm not a Chevy guy, maybe I'm a Ford guy, maybe I'm an RB guy, maybe I'm a Barra guy or whatever. But which one of those kind of combinations tickles your fancy? Which one would you be more likely to gravitate to? Is it because there's guys that are the popularity of my D-stroke LS, if that's any indication, guys like the little high RPM kind of motor. So the DZ302 with airflow research heads and a good cam and all that, that's certainly going to be popular. People love that. People love running like 75,000 or 8,000 RPM. They like that stuff. That speaks to them. Some guys want it easier, a simple head or cam upgrade and then a little bit of nitrous, and it's cheap and it's down and dirty and it's ready to go, and you can do it usually primarily with wrecking yard stuff. That works good. Some guys like strokers. In the video I put up, we had and I say we, I mean mostly Westech because it's their motor. They have a Dart SHP short block that's a 372 stroker, and that's a good combination. It's a big bore Dart block 4125 with a standard 350 stroke, a 348 stroke. Good combination and makes plenty of power. Plus, it has the big bore and short stroke, so you already know it's going to rev. So that makes really good power, especially with the right cam and heads. And again, airflow research heads on that. So it's got plenty of head flow. It's got a good size hydraulic roller cam with single plane intake manifolds. We know that it always makes good power. Then there's always boost. I mean, you could run boost on almost anything. On ours, we ran it on a heads cam intake. We just upgraded some of the stuff on a motor that probably would have already done it anyway. But we had an L98, and originally I thought that it was the original factory L98 cam. Turns out that it's not. And not only is it not, I don't know what it is. There's no markings on it or anything. So this test was done way back. But it made quite a bit more power in stock trim than I would expect an L98 to make. But it did well. And then we put and if you'll notice in these videos, if you've watched these videos, I always like to throw these like little tidbits in. And I don't tell anybody about it. It's not advertised like in the thumbnail or in the introduction or even in the description or anything. But if you watch those videos, I like to put some other kind of test in there, because almost always, even on these things where I'm doing a build up and we're doing, okay, this is a 500 horsepower motor, this is how we made it, and here's a couple of other ones along the way. If you notice, we did like with the stroker, with a 372 stroker deal, we ran it with both with two different kinds of cylinder heads. So ran it with a big 227 CNC, full CNC big port head, and then we also ran it with a small as cast head, because we were in doing all that testing, we were also doing a cylinder head test. So it's kind of cool because I didn't talk about it very much, but when you go in and watch the video, you go, oh, well, he also did this and threw this in, just kind of as an extra. But the interesting thing is, like in that case, how well the as cast head did. Because if you look at those and you're building a motor that was going to make 500 plus horsepower, and maybe we're always thinking about more, but if you're doing that, you're thinking, okay, I'm definitely going to pick the bigger head. But the reality is that the as cast head was like within 10 or 15 horsepower of the double throwdown super CNC head. So at that power level, the as cast head was doing very well. And if I hadn't have showed you what the difference in the power curve was behind the wheel, you probably wouldn't know. It would still do the same kind of thing. So, and then the same thing with the, and we also did a Vortec supercharged deal. I did a cam test on that one that I didn't put in, But on the turbo version, we also did the same thing. I ran the L98, but then we did a cam upgrade. But the cam upgrade that I did was actually a nitrous cam. And that's interesting for a number of reasons. One, I didn't know what the cam was that we were replacing, but I also replaced that camshaft, whatever it was, ran it under boost with a single turbo, a whole set turbo from a kit designed for an L98 Corvette from the guys at HP Performance way back, as a single turbo with a front mounted air to air. But I ran it with whatever cam was in this L98, and then also ran it with the nitrous cam, once again proving that, hey, guess what? We ran a nitrous cam on a turbo motor, and guess what it did? It made boost and did all the things it's supposed to do. The kind of cool thing that's really interesting about the tune port stuff is that if you look, even with the turbo, we're making peak power at about the same RPM because the boost curve is fairly consistent. We only ran like 8.5 pounds. We only ran 19 degrees of total timing, which we could have run quite a bit more with good gas. And we didn't run E85 back then. It was just probably 191 mix. But even at 19, that's still a little shy of probably where we would want to be and where it would make best power at. But the thing makes a silly amount of torque relative to the horsepower. Like it made over 600 foot-pounds and then made 500 horsepower or 400 and something horsepower, 50 or 60 horsepower. I think we only picked up about 10 or 15 horsepower. So it's probably like 485 or something with the regular cam. But the torque kind of stayed the same. So it was a little bit indifferent in that area of the curve. The camshaft, the 212, 218, I think it was, it was 212, 222 on the nitrous cams, was a little bit wider on the exhaust side, but it picked up power, in the high RPM, if you can call 5,500 or 6,000 RPM high RPM, because that was still way past the power peak. But that's where the gains were, and so that's what it did. And again, nitrous cam works as a turbo cam. Whatever cam was it, like didn't even look at the cam. We looked at it after we took it out. I didn't know what it was, but it didn't matter because one thing that we knew about it, whatever it was a turbo cam because we ran it with a turbo, so that officially made it a turbo cam. So, and then we also ran a Vortex supercharged heads cam and intake. Also, that is, in fact, I think it was the same L98 that we had run on the turbo, eventually ran on the turbo thing, but we did an upgrade on, I think we put some Speedmaster heads on it and then a bigger camshaft, quite a bit bigger camshaft, and ran a Vortex on it. And unlike the turbo, the Vortex has a rising curve. So down at 3,000 RPM, which is where I think we started the power run at on the dyno, it was only making about 2 pounds of boost, and then it made about 8 pounds at the top. So you have a big disparity in the boost, and so you kind of have this rising boost curve. Kind of traditional and indicative of a centrifugal supercharger. The interesting thing about that is I didn't show you the difference in the big cam and the small cam. There's quite a bit of difference in the camshaft. But the interesting thing is you notice from the photos, you can see we ran the carb bonnet, or the carb enclosure from Vortex. So basically you put a carburetor in there and enclose it and seal it. And so everything is pressurized. So you don't have to worry about fuel leaks like when you run a carb head on it. You don't have to run a blow through carburetor in it, just run a regular carburetor in it. We ran Quick Fuels, I think, back then. Or Barry Grant's, Demons probably. But in this case, I ran it fuel injected because we had a combination, an intake manifold that was set up that was already modified to accept port injection. So we ran it fuel injected, and what I did was enclose a 4-hole 4150 throttle body from AccuFab in the enclosure. And the only reason I did that is because that's how I had all the tubing and stuff to hook up the Vortex. Otherwise, we just would have put and maybe back then we didn't actually have a carb bonnet like we have from CSU or from other places that we just bolt onto the carburetor, because then we would have just bolted it onto the 4-hole throttle body, because the 4-hole throttle body wouldn't have cared about angularity of the inlet of that the way a carburetor sometimes does. Sometimes if you come in at an angle relative to the Venturis and stuff, it throws the signal off in the carburetor. It wants to be straight in line with the carburetor. Some of them will allow you to go 90 degrees to the carburetor. But with the enclosure, you're just blowing into the enclosure. And one of the things Vortec did with their new enclosures, relatively new, is that they put diffusers in there to try to give it, I think, to try to have more equal pressure and flow within this like little, I call it the Jupiter 2. It's like the little lost in space. I call it the Jupiter 2 enclosure. And so that seems to work fairly well. And so and then the question is, if you look at all these combinations, like with the 305, we ran a 305, we ran it stock with a tune port, we ran it with modifications and a different kind of tune port. Basically, it was a Holley Stealth ram, which is a tunnel ram, but with a box on top of it, but with fuel injection. So it actually works fairly well. It makes good power. It's certainly a lot better, and certainly a lot better top end power than a typical tune port, which are really, really long. Whereas the tunnel ram is not nearly as long as a tune port, but longer still than most single plane deals. So we ran that, and then we replaced that again with a Victor Junior intake manifold set up for fuel injection, but we didn't run fuel injection, so there's a lot of mixing and matching in all these combinations. We ran it carbureted, but I had to run it was at least an inch Wilson spacer on top of the carburetor, on top of the intake manifold, to raise the carburetor up so that the throttle linkage didn't hit the fuel rails, because we had to have the injectors in place to plug the holes basically in the ports. And then we ran a Zex perimeter plate, 4150 carbureted nitro setup, and that always works well. And ran, and then we were able to push it over 500 horsepower from about 365 or 370, I think. So we're able to push it over the 500 horsepower mark with that. And as it goes to show you, and one of the things I put in the video is that, the 305, the best small block ever, because it's so just maligned by people. Oh, those are terrible. You should never have one. But as we showed, and as the 1980s and 1990s show, it was kind of the go-to thing until they would reintroduce the L98 in the Corvettes, and then in the Camaros as well, to try to show that the 350 kind of was still king. So all of that is good stuff, and I think we need a poll up here. So the poll for tonight is boost better than displacement for your buildup, for any build? So are there really all motor guys that would rather have high RPM, stroker kind of deals? You change your cam and cam gear for your timing set and use the Terminator. Make sure you change the settings to Paul's. I don't know what Paul's is. They can't pick up or you'll never get the firing order. You have to, and I forgot to call you, Todd. I'm sorry. You do have to select what your selection is. We run it. We can run it as a batch. We can run it as using just the 58, just the 24. You can put a custom combination in there, but you have to go in and select all that stuff. You also have to have the firing order correctly in there. More importantly, obviously, for sequential stuff. Boost is replacement for displacement. Gordon Murray would definitely advocate for NA power. But in looking back at the McLaren F1, I would say that that thing would still be the best supercar if it had that motor and it had boost. Would you have still chosen your new Fox body Mustang if the Camaro 5-speed came with a 5.7? Even the HO version, the L69, when I bought mine, because mine's an 88, so I bought it in I think I got it in November of 87. I ordered my car actually. So I got it in late 87. I think a stick 5.7 would have been faster, but that's not why I bought my car. I actually bought my car to go showroom stock racing, and you wouldn't have run a 5.7 5-speed probably in showroom stock racing. Although I am thinking about in that statement, I don't know why not. For daily driving, it's a tough choice. The thing that I do, like I like stroker motors are really good, especially when you drive a small displacement motor and then you put something else in and you know what that difference is. It's dramatic. But then so is boost. And the nice thing about boost is, especially when we're on the dyno, is that it's just so easy to add more power. If all you run is 87, if all you can run is 87, then displacement is better than boost. I think I would agree with that, Eric. I think if you're running, if that's what you're doing is running it on the cheap and you're running that, I have seen some guys run boost on really low compression stuff and run on 87 octane, although you just can't run very much. Wish I had an 8792 Z28 Camaro to stick a big block in. 420 cubic inch small block. I ran boost on a small block like that, although it wasn't really a very good one. 466 big block with 20 pounds felt pretty good, I would imagine. I have a 3,100 pound car with a 2JZ. It's pretty pathetic till it's on boost, especially if it's a stock compression 2JZ. Wheel horsepower on a 3,000 pound car is still legit on the street. I agree, especially with the guy that knows how to drive. Todd, did you get it running? 500 wheel horsepower is even more than 500 flywheel horsepower. How's our poll doing? Oh, it looks like we're split again. 48% saying yes, that boost is better, but displacement is oh, I was gonna say displacement is currently winning, and it still is, but only 51 to 49. Do we have any love for AMC 360? Yes, for all the AMCs. A Gremlin and a Pacer and an AMX, especially. Nitrous is a hand grenade. I actually like nitrous. I went in my Mustang before I put the blower on that. I went through, I don't know, certainly 20 or 30 bottles, and it may have been more than that. L28ET felt pretty pathetic stock. I guess that's what 7 point something to 1 compression, 6.5 pounds of do. I thought that they were doing 7 and 7 was their kind of their thing, Oliver. A Hornet, yep. Rebel Machine, yeah. There's lots of good stuff. I need to do. We'll put an AMC on the list of to do. Got to get through this Pontiac stuff. I'm sure that's play, but did you ever play with a 385 stroke 351 that uses a stock length rod and 302 piston? No, I've seen people use that combination before. I've run 385 strokes. I've run motors that have had them. I didn't put it together though. Richard, how do I not risk stock ring Gavin piston on my K24A2 but still push it past 15 pounds? You're going to risk it anyway, but you can try making sure that the charge temperature is really low, and run it a little bit fat, and then also have E85 in it. And if you're just doing pulls on it, might be okay for a little bit. I spent plenty of time with 4A Toyota engines, smaller non-supercharged 16 and 20 valves or sweet. I do like those. I like those a lot. That's the motor that I would like to have in a 57, I think a 57, maybe a 56 Nash Metropolitan with a 5-speed. Have you seen N54 BMWs are getting 1100 horsepower on stock internals, somewhat safe? I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that power level on stock block, stock piston, stock rod, stock crank stuff. Bill, I'm inclined to build a stroker FE with a 4155 bore, 4250 stroke, 460 cubic inches boost or remote location. That'd be good. Is a high horsepower, low dollar build a unicorn? No, a turbo LS is junkyard LS is that. How high can you safely rev a stock LS? It's not going to make power is the problem. They make peak power at like 56 or 5700. So anything that you'd be doing to rev that past that is not doing you anything except being way on the downside of the curve. I took a C706, rented to Thunder Hill, overheated so badly, went into limp mode and wouldn't restart until I disconnected the battery. Yeah, even though those things are kind of rolling heat exchangers, there is something to be said for that, for an NA motor when you're running it on a road course. Todd, time to put on some big boy tires. Yeah, if you go through those, that's going to be money. AJ, do you know anything about, Richard, do you know anything about the 305-inch Mopar in the Arrow Nose Daytona? So a Superbird, is that what that is? That's a Plymouth. What the other one's a Daytona, right? Yeah. Supposedly with the Arrow package, it was doing well against the big blocks without the Arrow design. Oh, okay. No, I don't know anything about that motor. Maybe it was a Trans Am based motor, maybe then? About a Mac for port boost controller. For boost controller, I'm sure. Can you run E85 with cast heads? Yes. Superbird and a Super Bee. A Super Bee is a different thing. A Superbird is the Plymouth equivalent to the Dodge Daytona. Right? Am I right? Am I right in thinking that? Well, I think that I'm not. Yeah, that's right. It is a Dodge Daytona. And then the other one was the Superbird. That's what I thought. When do you do a 500 horsepower 307? I've never run across a 307. Does the type of boost matter for any application versus displacement? I don't know what you mean by does it matter? For instance, positive blower versus a turbo. I don't know what your question is about. Are you asking what effect the different blowers or turbos have? You like that VGG is putting a Gen 3 Hemi in a C10. I don't know who that is, and I didn't know that they were doing it. And I think that people should, but the answer is people should put whatever motor that they like in anything. To me, there's no, oh, you shouldn't put a LS in a Mustang, or you shouldn't put a Hemi in a C10 or whatever. You should put in whatever you want. You put a tank motor in, put a turbo diesel like Oliver did in the Nova. You put in whatever you want, whatever speaks to you. For the poll, is my question the type of boost? The type of boost doesn't matter. Just boost. Just any kind of boost. It could be whatever you want. Serious bet, would a GT3582 have too much back pressure on a 3-valve 4.6? Looking for 500 horsepower for burnouts. It would definitely do that power, but the back pressure would be high on that. Oh, Vice Grip Garage. Okay. Yeah, I know those. I don't know those guys, but I watch their stuff. NA motors are cheap. Like if we go get a wrecking yard motor or whatever, those are cheap. But if you're trying to make lots of power, like if you're trying to make 1,000 horsepower, making 1,000 horsepower from an NA motor would get pretty expensive. Dallas, if you're going through Indiana on I-70 to Ohio, I can show you parts of the 429. Let's see. See if I can see where I'm going. We'll just put that in. There we go. And we're off and running. When it has to Google Earth and back out to show you all of the United States, then you know you're making a serious trip. So it looks like it's telling me to go Highway 80 through Salt Lake and through Cheyenne, Omaha, Des Moines. Up near Toledo, South Bend. That kind of way is where it's asking me to go through. I'm not going 70 would be going through Colorado. That'd be going over the Rockies. I'm not doing that. He's putting a Gen 3 Hemi in an old square body. Good. I think the Gen 3 Hemis are good motors. Only 19 likes. No, there's 63 up there now. How are you going to do the show if you're on the road? I'm going to have to do it mobile, right? Knowledge. I can't wait to get boost on my car, K24, K20, TSX, but I feel really needs a limited slip differential first. It always needs boost first and then the other things. I'm getting ready to do an On3 turbo kit on my Gen 5 L83 single turbo, hoping for... How are you getting the fuel, Aaron, to your L83? Chevrolet made an Aero Coupe Monte Carlo back in the 80s, and they also made a Pontiac version of that as well. What kind of HP performance? What kind of rifle do you have over there in the corner? It's actually a pellet gun. So right now we're at the poll's at 50-50. So we're split between the all motor guys and the boost guys. They say the stock system is good for that power, but I'm gonna add port injection. So the factory injection is good for 500 horsepower. Admiral, you didn't have to put money in. You didn't have to put money in, and I'm gonna send you that money back because you used the word thoughts. I know that on some of the turbo stuff on the LT based deals, they're putting LT4 stuff in there. They're putting in the injectors, and I think the pump, you can change the lobe on a cam and that kind of stuff. Tim, nobody said I don't like AMC. I like the AMC movie theaters, and I like the AMC cars too. Well, the motors. I listed 3 of them that I like specifically. $1 per mile is the norm for shipping. Enclosed and careful is more. Mine's going on a tow dolly. Can also stand for particle projection cannon. See, now you're talking. I ran NA LS2, had on the dyno a few weeks ago. I was putting 440 to the wheels. That's good. What is an aftermarket ECM good for? I always wondered. Everyone runs an ignition controller anyway. Why would you spend $3,000 on ECM when you have a $1,000 ignition controller anyway? As long as you have the ability to tune the air fuel and the timing with your factory ECU or whatever piggyback thing you're trying to do, then you don't need a standalone. The LT style V6, the LV3 or LV1. I have videos up on that. The guys from Brian Tooley ran one of those. They're good little, they're certainly really good for a V6 motor. Daniel, 1,000 horsepower, 540 big block Chevy, 1 mile per gallon, 1,000 horsepower, 4.8 turbo, LS, 28 miles per gallon. I don't know how you think you're going to get a 4.8 liter to get 28 miles per gallon, whether it has a turbo or not. And tell them about the Twinkie. That's right. It's a big Twinkie. What about the Twinkie? Bowling ball mortar. I've seen the cannons that shoot those. That's pretty interesting. Twinkies are good. Although I was really excited when I remember when they first started coming out, like the carnivals and stuff, the deep fried Twinkies. I thought, oh, that's got to be like a little slice of heaven. Honestly, I was pretty disappointed in a deep fried Twinkie. I like the regular Twinkie much better. What's the safe max boost you can run a turbo K24 with no tune? You can't run any boost on it. you could detonate it with no boost if the tune is wrong. It needs to be tuned. Does a K48 consume exactly twice the fuel of a K24? Same car, same gears, same vacuum load? No. I think we did try a Snickers bar too. When I was at Santa Cruz, I think we did. Yeah, Twisted, a standalone ECU, a guy that's just using it to, like, if you look at the success that Matt's having over at Sloppy with factory ECUs and the tunes that he has and turbo motors and driving around and all that's working out really well. If that's your deal and that's what you want to do, it obviously works really well. You can tune the airfield, you can tune the timing, tune the drivability. You can do all that stuff with the factory ECU. It works really good. Where guys need other things, that's where standalone stuff becomes good. More data logging and more channels that you can do other things with and control other things. Then it becomes necessary. Like for me, if I had a factory ECU and we could change the tune on it very rapidly and without having to load programs and stuff, I probably would use that if we had the harness and all that stuff. Because I don't really care for what I'm doing as long as I can make the air fuel and the timing. And then in some cases, like with the MS3 Pro, on the 4200 on the Atlas, if I could change the cam timing as well, as long as I could do the simple things that I'm doing while I'm running it, it's all of those work. Bottoms up. How does boost affect ring gear selection? Currently running a 430 behind a turbo 350, but about to put a 5 through the twins. What were you running? What motor were you running before that? Twin 58s on a 5.3 is not going to need a 430 gear, I wouldn't think. Because one is that, you know, they always tell you that with a turbo motor, you need a little bit of load. You don't need a 430 because I think traction is going to be your problem. And then the other thing that is if you're running NA and now you're running boosted, you're going to run a lot more mile an hour. You're going to run another 25 or 30 miles an hour. So you also, most guys need the gearing also to be able to, you know, run out the back end. Pro tip, next time you're dealing with a Holley 3.5 handheld, get a cutoff from a zip tie and use it as a stylus. Nice. See? That's why we come here, man. Poll is still 51% yes and 49% no. X, you see a stock ECU control, trans brake, nitrous, brake controller, yada, yada, yada. I think we just went through all that, right? So I said there are other things that you need to control. So you don't have to like oversell the aftermarket ECUs because we're all on the same page. you can do lots and lots of guys can do lots and lots of stuff with a factory ECU on a turbo LS. Lots of guys are out there running it, so we know it's possible. If, as I said before, you're going racing and you want more data logging capability and you have other channels for other things that you want to control that the factory ECU can't do, then you get something else. I keep a red-blue plug stock ECU on the shelf just in case. It's not a bad idea if you have something, if your setup is such that you can just plug another stock ECU in, and one that will just kind of get you home. That's a good idea. I think the factory ECU is still like on an LS. They're still doing trans control with those, right? They're still doing 4LAEs and and yuck 4L60s. But the Holly, the HP won't control that, right? But the Terminator will. Is that what it's called? Not the Terminator. Yeah, I know 4L60. I said the 60 word. 4L65s. So they're five better, right? Dominator. That's what I'm thinking of. I was thinking Terminator because I was just watching the original Terminator. I've used the Honda. I haven't used the K Pro stuff because I haven't done tuning on a K series with Honda, but I did all the B series stuff with Honda. It worked really well. Does using a carb box like a Vortec have any cons? Yes, it does. The enclosure is kind of a pain if you're having to do tuning because you have to take the lid off every time, and it's a lot of bolts going around. And then you have to take the lid off and disconnect the throttle linkage. And if you're doing jet changes or you want to do anything to the carburetor, that's a little bit more of an issue than it is with like a CSU carburetor and a bonnet on top of it, because then you have access to the bowls and everything. So if we're doing if we're doing tuning and we're putting a blow-through carburetor on some sort of combination, whether it's a turbo or a centrifugal blower or whatever, there's almost always going to be tuning on it. So it's a little bit less friendly. Once you get it dialed in and it's going to stay in the carb box, it's not that big a deal. Richard, have you ever tested high ratio rockers with small lift cams versus stock rocker ratios with high lift cams? Both cams having the same duration? No, you'd have to be pretty specific about the cams that you made to see if getting it from the rocker ratio versus getting it from the cam, if one of those is beneficial. I know I've seen discussions on that. I think Vizard's done discussions on that about why the rocker ratio is better and stuff. I myself am more apt to go with the I'm more team cam on that than I am rocker ratio. And in saying that, I don't know why. And also in saying that, I'm putting a 1.9 rocker on the 3800. So maybe I'm not as much team cam as I think I am. Richard would like to invite you to my home for cold snacks and a quick once over on the plumbing and performance. Oh, you want me to take a look at it? Yep, Sarah Connor. It's a very young Sarah Connor too. And Michael Biehn and what's his name is in there too. Who played Hicks in so he played Hicks in Aliens, and then who played what was the android's name? Bishop. Who played Bishop was also in Terminator. Bishop, hey man. I don't Todd, I'm not interested in doing it for channel content. I would just help you out because I want to help you out. Aaron, I didn't know the Truck North was boost friendly. It is very boost friendly, except it's not an L83 cam. Brian Tooley has an L83 cam that you can run with boost if you want more power out of it. Take a look at the video that I have up on the L83 test, and you can see the new cam makes a lot of power. But it's a VVT cam. It's not a Truck North cam. Steve Dulcich played Bishop. How do I tell the difference between the 455 family of engines? You like between a 455 and a 350? Does anybody know? Is there an external way to tell that? Aaron, the VVT would help a lot under boost if you keep it. If you ditch the VVT, you're getting rid of a lot of what makes that motor work really well. Yeah, Todd, that's really cool that it's running, man. Yeah, Aaron, the VVT adds power everywhere through the curve, and so that's just really good for boost. Bishop, oh Lance, that's who it is. And then he was also in Alien versus Predator, and also which was awesome that they put him in that. He was Wayland. Yeah, keep the VVT. They shouldn't have any problem with just adding boost to that. In fact, they shouldn't have to adjust the VVT at all. Aaron, you don't have to do a phaser lockout if you're keeping the stock cams. If you're putting a bigger cam in, like that Brian Tooley racing cam that I was telling you about, you'll have phaser limiters. There won't be lockouts though. What's the best cam for towing? Matt, what's the best cam for towing on a Gen 6 454? There are some small comp cams that would work well for towing. I'm trying to think. I normally put a 274 or 282, but those are pretty big because we're trying to get near the maximum of those cams of the available piston to valve clearance, kind of. So there we go. There's a Gen 6 hydraulic roller, Extreme Marines. Those are actually pretty good. For extreme energy, you could go with an XR258, which is a 206-212, or a 212-218, which is a 264 camshaft. And it even says good replacement on the smaller one, good replacement cam for minimally modified fuel-injected engines And then the 264 says very good low RPM torque, great for towing applications. Richard, any drawbacks of running my intake cam, timing advanced and open loop, and just going 100% duty from X RPM to X RPM? I don't know. I've never tuned a K series ever, so I would be the wrong guy to ask about that. Do it. You just have to say, I'll be back. That's what he says in all of his movies. Yep, that was Predator. That was good. I can't believe Jeremy dropped that big old thing on that guy's head, and then he came back from it. Yeah, carbon closures are not cheap. That's one of the things that they are going to be more expensive, and they go way back to the Paxton days, the supercharged Avantis, and they also had bonnets, which I didn't know way back then. I remember finding it. I mean, this was a long time ago now, but I remember finding out that they also had those, which was kind of cool. I love, somebody mentioned, Dean mentioned Chuck Norris. I love the fact that and I really like all of the Expendables movies with with Sylvester Stallone, and then all the other people from all the action stars. But I like that Lone Wolf McQuaid basically was in there, and he came in and just destroyed everybody. I was dude alone. Yeah, Commando. That's Tommy Chong's daughter, Ray Don Chong, was in that, I think. Are you gonna do more doodling, or are you gonna do more 360 Magnum videos? Yes. I think a K series probably is one of the best 4-cylinders that you can, if you're looking for power. It's hard to beat those. How about some fuel efficiency mods? That would be something that had to be done out on the street, possibly on a chassis dyno, but even then you have to simulate road conditions, so it's not the same. Steve Dulcich is a mastermind. It's an interesting spelling of his name, though. We need a Route C2 2.0 with dual twin turbo J series engines. I just like to have one J series engine in something. Yeah, I want to do J series on the engine dyno, but I'm not getting another motor until I go through and finish some of these ones that I have. What's a good cam for a 400 small block? Twin Precision 75s. That's a lot. T56. You want good chop and takeoff. So you want lots of low speed, but lots of chop, right? And you want twin 70, 75, 76s. Are you sure they're not 76, 75s? Why do you want that much turbo? Are you trying to is this a 2,000 horsepower kind of thing? Because if it's not, you need to step way down in turbo if you're wanting it to, because then you could get a choppy cam, but get responsive turbos, and then it would be better. So if you're never going to use the other 1,000 horsepower worth of turbos, then just put 1,000 horsepower turbos in them. Put twin 3582s or something like that. Use someone that can do a killer tune on a 19 Coyote. It's already running 990s. I'd say your tune's probably spot on, right? Oh, Colonel Mustard. But it's always with a candlestick. I was going to say it's got to be with a candlestick. But I'm more of a conservatory guy. BMW M52. I like the BMW motors. I like all of those inline 6-cylinder 4-valve motors. Have you done Siamese runners on a TPI? Yes. If you go back and look at the video that I have up on where I ran all of the TunePort stuff, SLP Siamese runners were part of that test. The best thing that you can do for fuel economy on any motor is drive better. Don't use the gas very much. Drive at a slower speed on the freeway. Don't get back on the throttle when you're going up hills. It's the driving is the single biggest thing you can do to the way that you drive is the single biggest thing you can do to improve your fuel mileage. It's better than almost all of the other things that you can do. You can jack the tire pressure up, you can lower the car, you can put aero on it, you know, you can take off accessories, you can do lots of things. But really the way that most people drive is just they wonder why they don't get mileage, and then they're in the gas all the time. And the other thing, actually, the other thing that helps besides the way you drive, and this actually tailors the way that you drive, is if you put a fuel mileage gauge in your car. If you put something in that tells you when you're doing bad, and it shows you, oh, look, you're getting really terrible gas mileage right now. And then what that does is teaches people how to drive. Because then you're going to want to be, you know, you have a little green zone. Wow, this is good fuel economy right here. Basically, that means don't get on the throttle, don't have, you know, high vacuum and stuff. And so, except under decel, which is okay. But it teaches you how to drive. And most people don't know. A lot of people don't have any idea that them going to 3/4 throttle every time that they leave a stoplight. Because if you're not going to full throttle, then you're just wasting gas. If you're going full throttle or you're going 3/4 throttle because you're traction limited, I can understand that. But most people are just going because they're taking off. Well, that's bad for fuel mileage. So unless you're racing, you should just take off at 1/4 throttle or an 1/8 throttle, and then you'll get real good fuel economy. Actually, vacuum is pumping losses. Yes, but in every car, well, in 99% of the cars made that are driving on the road, when you have a high vacuum rating, you're also getting good fuel mileage. Very, very few cars, with the exception of BMW or some that would be controlled where the timing or something is controlling, and you can open the throttle a lot, or like with my Del Sol, which you have a lot of throttle opening. But even you got better mileage at higher vacuum readings because those things kind of go together with less throttle angle. Drive like an egg between the foot and the accelerator. Yep. Floor mats under the brake pedal. Yep. Big blocks do better on mileage if you're kind of hard on them. Get it in a higher gear faster. That's not accurate. If you always go immediately from gas to brake when stopping somewhere, expecting, yeah, you need to learn how to drive. You need to learn to coast into the light. You shouldn't be heavy on braking and heavy on gas. You should be easy on both of them. In the video, you said that the limiting factor for an engine to rev is the valve train, not the short stroke or over square engine. Yes, that's for 95 or closer to 99% of the engines that we're talking about here. Any kind of street motor, if you're looking at if you're building an LS or you're building whatever you're building, the bore and stroke have almost no effect on the RPM ability of the motor. Everything's in the valve train because that's going to be the first big hurdle that you have to get past. The bore and stroke stuff where you're starting being concerned about making power that part actually comes before the limitation of things like piston speed and stuff where stroke length and that would come into play. That's way down the list of things that limit RPM. Yeah, diesels don't have any vacuum because they don't have throttle, but they're throttled by something else. And that's what I was talking about. They're throttled by fuel. So if you have a gas engine where you have no throttle and it's throttled by something else, which you can do, you can throttle it by valve opening. If you could do that, if there was a motor that was currently doing that, and that way you're just having less pumping losses. There are still losses there, but you have pumping losses now, just not in the intake manifold. So that you've gotten rid of all of that stuff if you could do that. I had an El Camino that had a gauge. 2 more minutes. I had an El Camino that had a gauge that would show vacuum to indicate fuel. That's what they were. They were just kind of glorified vacuum gauges. Stuff that's in modern cars. Like my wife has one that tells you what's going on. It has a whole display case that tells you all kinds of information, instantaneous, average, all of that stuff. And I think it's probably more than a vacuum gauge. They're probably also actually calculating injector pulse width and stuff. At least I'm hoping that they already have the technology. I mean, it's got more computer power than the space shuttle. And so, but even a vacuum gauge could go a long way towards helping you. Cruise and land, deceleration in gear, the injectors don't turn off all the time. They turn off for a period of time and then they come back on. Otherwise, your motor would die. Valvetronic uses the intake valves as a throttle. Yes, that's what I was talking about. So if you can control the valves, then you can control the throttle. And then if you don't have a throttle valve that's controlling airflow and you're controlling it with something else, then you get rid of the pumping losses that would be behind that closed valve and then the intake. Diesel fuel cut is magic. It works really good. It works really good for saving fuel on road race cars. It's pretty important. The Caddy 468 deal. That's actually a good idea. I mean, I don't know if it was very well executed, but the DoD stuff is kind of doing the same thing. You don't turn your blinker on until after you've made the turn. If we're watching this channel, we don't care about fuel mileage. Everybody should care about everything. Fuel mileage is part of performance, in my opinion. And if you can help it do that while you're doing that, because it's not, nobody here is at wide open throttle all the time when they're driving their car. That's just not possible. So when you're driving it, if you're driving it to a race, or you're driving to your friends, or you're driving it to the next stoplight where you're going to race somebody, or driving it to the track, you would care about what it's doing while it's doing that. And if you can improve upon that, that's better performance. Yeah, Casey, the performance gauge is a vacuum gauge. There's no stock Coyote that can run 7s in the quarter. That would be a pretty powerful stock Coyote, right? .226 rear end, that's good. 241 was the tallest one I remember. That was like from a C6 Ford van or something. But yeah, with a 3-speed trans. Oh, I thought somebody said a stock Coyote went 7s. Dan, did it only operate when after it went into the higher gears? Is that why they disabled it? I think someone's claiming a stock Coyote long block. So one without ring gap or anything. That would be pretty neat if it did that. That'd be pretty impressive. How'd you like a Cyclone Typhoon vehicles? I thought that they were awesome. I mean, the motor's not the greatest, but it is a 4.3 and it had a factory turbo on it and a factory intercooler on it. So that was all good back in the day. What race tech? What does Houston stock mean? Is that a version of stock? The Typhoon Cyclones had air to water coolers on them. Yep. And so we're going to close out our poll. 51% saying yes, the Boost is better. So Boost wins out by a narrow margin because obviously the combination, I always do this in the videos, that the best combination is both of those things, obviously. Displacement and boost, or just lots of boost, whatever, lots of displacement, a mountain motor. So we'll end our poll there. '65 Ford Fairlane with a 289 and a 3-speed and a 298 gear. I could get 22 to 24 miles per gallon driving between Las Vegas and Utah. That's pretty hilly there. So who's going to get the last one? Okay, Jaron Wilson, yours will be the last comment for tonight. How about 2 twin turbos on a 632 cubic inch big block, and anytime you want to add amount of air into the engine, you change displacement. Okay, cool. Yeah, we're grooves and land. It's the margin of error. It's the rounding. And on that note, you guys have a good weekend. I will see you guys all tomorrow. It's Friday night, so go do fun Friday night things. I'm going to. That's actually just water. And old water at that. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'll see you all tomorrow.